Hi, everyone. Welcome to the data management section where I'm here interviewing with Vincent, who's the CEO of Adamant7. I'm really excited to be here with Vincent. Vincent, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. With that, to give the audience, again, a little bit more perspective of how we got here, we looked at well over 120 different startups globally that are what we consider part of the data management category. And one of the things that really stood out to us was a company called Andaman7, primarily because what they're doing within the patient data management space. And we're going to go into those a little bit today, but to help give the audience a great visual, we're going to jump, Vincent, directly to the live demo, and then we'll go from there. Sounds good?
Perfect for me.
Welcome to Andaman7, improving health and financial outcomes with complete data sets. Pharma and med device companies use Andaman7 to fill the gap in patient-generated evidence they need for their treatments to be approved and reimbursed. Evidence is generated through patient-reported outcome measurements, medical devices, wearables, and EMR integrations. Integrating these data sources is unique among ePro vendors. Data entry errors and wasted time are reduced, while data collection and subject retention is increased. Here is an example of a quality of life survey delivered to study participants through Andaman7. Patients also prefer Andaman7 because it gives them access and control of their full health record through the personal health records section of that platform. Until now, this has been a difficult and stressful experience for patients and providers. Many caregivers don't have the patient's full health record available in an up-to-date and timely manner. This inherent value of control over their own health information means that the patients will keep and use the app over their entire health journey. This makes recruiting, long-term follow-up, and recurring consent easier for study sponsors. Andaman7 addresses data privacy in a unique way through our circle of trust. To make interoperability easy, the patient can share their record by clicking Share Record, searching for the person or organization they want to share the record with, then choose the parts of the record they want to share, and Andaman7 synchronizes the data with the recipient. If a patient wants to stop sharing their health data, they simply toggle the green button, and no more data will be shared with that person or organization. Andaman7 anonymizes or pseudo-anonymizes the data depending on the sponsor's use case. No data is ever deleted from the database, and all data is time, date, and author stamped. Our data security solution is also very unique and advantageous. The Andaman7 platform stores medical data on the user's device, not in the cloud. The data is then exchanged in a peer-to-peer way. This advanced software reduces the risk of hackers and fundamentally eases consent process and accelerating the pace of data exchange with the patients.
Great. Well, Vincent, before we even jump into the uniqueness of your product itself, I wanted to ask you why, or if there is a backstory about why you created this company.
Yes, there is a personal story and a professional story behind that company. So I'm a software engineer by training, and I worked all my career in health IT, health software, both for the care industry. By that I mean hospitals, doctors, nurses, all of these people, and research industry. So by that I mean pharma companies, CROs, medical device manufacturers, and so on. So I believe I have a pretty good understanding of data management in the health domain, with all the privacy issues, with all the security issues, with all the complexities of structured and unstructured text, dictionaries, codified text, and so on. Then I was lucky to sell my previous company, and then I decided to do something more for the patient initially, with some benefits for the care and the research actors. And going back now 13 years ago, it was in 2007, I was diagnosed with cancer, leukemia, and I was 43 years old, so rather young for leukemia. and I was pretty lucky to be put on a very efficient drug. It's called Gleevec, and it's a very targeted treatment that basically makes me free of the cancer, while the cancer is still there, but it's completely under control, and I have almost no side effects. So thank you to modern medicine. Thank you to targeted therapies like that one. Before that drug, your life expectancy with that leukemia would be a few months to maximum 2 years. So it was really lethal, and now it's really benign, right? Not as bad as flu, for example. Unfortunately, 3 months after me, my son Peter in English, was diagnosed with a bone cancer, right? Another type of cancer, but very serious one. He was 10 years old, so very young. And for him, unfortunately, there was no targeted treatment. So he went through chemotherapy for quite a few months, radiotherapy, bone marrow transplant. So he was isolated in a special room in a hospital for 4 weeks with nobody coming in the room. And then he was amputated from his right leg at the end of the treatment. So today he's still alive. We are 13 years after that. He's still alive, but he has a serious handicap, and the treatment itself was hell, right? It lasted almost 2 years, and it was really painful. So 2 cancer experiences in the same family at 3 months intervals, and a very different process thanks to the targeted treatment, and very different outcome too. My son has a handicap for the rest of his life. He's working with a prosthesis, and for me, there is absolutely no side effects. So I wanted to do something about it and to help contribute to research by putting the patients in the loop, because a lot of pharma companies tell us that they need data, and they need lots of data to find new drugs. What we also realized as a family is that it was very difficult for you as a patient to have access to your health data. It's in several hospitals, several doctors, one family doctors, and it's very, very difficult to have a global view and to answer the questions of the various doctors that you meet, right? So this is why I wanted to create Andaman with the first 2 goals, which are to contribute to research, and the second one to give the patients their health data in an easy manner while respecting their privacy.
Wow. It's, healthcare ecosystem is quite unique in a sense that it seems like a lot of companies have a very personal story behind, and that's the motivation that drives the company forward, which is very unique. And
Sure.
It's an interesting backstory. And now with that, and with the purpose that you talked about, the end goal of your platform is being able to collect patient data in a variety of different ways. Can you walk us through how you're collecting this data? How do you process that data? I mean, you just talked about the complexities of that. What does this process look like on your end?
Yeah. So first, we don't like to say we collect data, right? We try to take a very different approach, because everybody's doing that, and everybody's trying to accumulate as much data as possible. And there's always that conflict of interest between the privacy and the individual rights of the patients and the rights of the or the interest of collecting data, right? So what we decided to do is to do the things right, even if it makes things more complicated, right? So what we decided is to first give the patients their data back, and to only store their data on their smartphone. So we do not store any data in the cloud. This is very unique. It's really different from most actors out there. And it's a 100% commitment to full privacy of the patient, right? They store everything on their smartphone. As a company, Andaman does not have access to the data, right? We do not want to have access to the data, right, directly. We give the patients their data. We collect it. The patients connect to the hospitals to collect the data. They collect it from the lab. All of the sources of data, including the connected devices, the watch, the glucometers, and so on. So all the sources, they collect the data and store it locally on the smartphone, and only there. Of course, we have backup mechanisms and everything. Then what we provide to the pharma companies, for example, is a way to offer to patients to contribute to research, right? So we don't sell data to pharma companies. We sell, if you want, the possibility to contact the patients. So how that works, it works in a quite classic manner. They used to work with paper questionnaire. We transform that into digital questionnaires, electronic questionnaires, and we send those questionnaires to the patients that agree to contribute to the research, right? So the patients have all their data locally. They are proposed to contribute to research. If they say yes, they receive first a consent, right? So they have to give their explicit consent. I agree to contribute to this trial, to share that data, very limited, right? For a given amount of time and for a specific purpose, just this study, right? If they consent to all of this, then the data is the individual pieces of data, so not the whole health record, just the minimum necessary data is collected. And when the patient sees all of that, they can very clearly see what they share, right? So they click on share, and that data is then collected and anonymized, and then forwarded to the researcher, right? So it's a very different approach to other competitors, if you want, or other projects. First, the patient collect their data locally on their smartphone, then they are being offered to participate to trials. And there is no data in the cloud, and Andaman does not have access to the data. We can just offer the patients to contribute to research. I hope this is clear enough.
No, I think that's important. And also one of the reasons why we wanted to highlight your company is I think your approach of, and I like how you made the correction with collecting and more gathering of patient data on behalf of the patient, and why that approach is important, especially directly for the patient. And I'll have more questions about that, and especially with privacy and security and all these other things. But I'm curious, what is that actual method of when a patient decides, hey, I want to figure out how I can access all my healthcare data? And they reach out and they use your tool to get that information for them. How do you actually do that? Are you calling up hospitals and requesting? Are these like official forms that you have to fill out? How do you deal with structured, non-structured data? Is there an algorithm in the back end that puts everything together? I'm just curious how that process actually works.
Yeah, okay. So since we don't want to see the data of patients, we do not collect the data on behalf of the patients and then send it to the patients. What we offer is to the patients to connect to the hospitals. There's various ways to do that, right? In the US and in Europe, for example, processes are different. Our company is based in Europe, right? So we are fully GDPR aware, and we want to be extremely strict on that. And so we apply those principles to all our customers, even if they are outside of Europe, right? So one example here in Europe, we have worked with a hospital, and they are compatible with Andaman. And so in this case, this specific hospital is asking the patients to go to the hospital at least once to show their electronic ID card and to give the consent to receive the data. Once this is done, the IT system of the hospital is sending to the patient all of the health data directly, of course, through our platforms, but everything is encrypted when it leaves the hospital. And so we don't see the data. And when it arrives on the smartphone, then it's visible to the patient very clearly. So that's one way to do it. The patient goes to the hospital, requests their data, and it gets sent through the platform. Another way to do it, most in the US, we do that, for example. There's many more possibilities in the US through the FHIR standard that is being adopted by almost all actors. And there what we do is when the patients are using Andaman, they go to the list of hospitals which is inside Andaman, and they see thousands of hospitals there because we're compatible with 85% of all US hospitals. So that means that approximately 85% of all American people can connect to their hospital, right? So this is the list of all hospitals. They select theirs, one or several, right? And when they click on that hospital, their smartphone is connecting to the hospital and is authenticated at the hospital directly. So the patients use their login password that they received from their hospitals before that moment, right? And then when they do that, there is an authorization to send the data to from the hospital to the patients. So there, again, the hospital is sending data through our platform in encrypted format, and the patients receive it. So again, we do not see the patient's data, and the patients somehow use their phone to connect to their hospital system to do the request and then to get the results.
Interesting.
It works the same way with labs, for example, right?
I see.
And if there's other ways, for example, on Apple, you know that Apple is also collecting, helping patients connect to the hospital. There, we directly take the data that Apple is collecting on behalf of the patient. So we use various ways. We don't want to restrict ourselves to one way. We use all the ways that are possible because we want to be global, and it's going to be different in the US, in Europe, and so on. We're compatible. Our platform is available in 22 languages, right? So that's really a global approach. It's all the European languages, of course, English, Spanish, but also Chinese, Japanese, Russian, Arabic. All of these languages are supported. So we want to be as open as possible because the situation is very different in all of these countries.
Wow, okay, that makes sense. And you highlighted the privacy portion quite a bit, and you wanted to make it very clear about your method of managing data on behalf of users and making sure that they're in full control. Why did you go this route? Why was this important to you to take this approach versus, what we see with all the other platforms in patient data management?
Well, I'm a software engineer, but I'm a patient too, right? You understood that our personal story make us realize that we were patients. So I was a bit tired of all of those data abuses, not in the medical sector, mainly in other sectors, right? All your data is constantly collected and used, and I'm fine with that. Like many citizens, I should say, they are fine up to a certain level. So there are a number of things they want. They want to know about it, right? Not in their back. They want to know what is being collected and for what purpose. They want to be able to say yes or no. They want to be able to, if they say yes now, to say no in 2 years, right? So people are not against sharing their data, but they want to be in control, finally, right? They want to know all of this, right? And it's the same for health data. It's even more important, right? Because for me, clearly, I want to share a lot of my health data with my doctor so he can provide the best care to me, right? But I don't want to share that data with somebody else that I don't know, for example, or for a large company or for an insurance company, right? I want to be very careful there, right? Now, if one pharma company is telling me we are trying to find a specific treatment for the cancer that your son has, of course, I will agree. Well, in my case, I will agree to share my son's data with that pharma company if it contributes to research, even if the company is going to make money with a drug, right? In this case, my personal interest is stronger. So it really varies if you want to share your data, depending on who you share it with, what data and the purpose and the duration and all. You want to be in control, right? So I started by saying, I am a patient. I want to be in control, so I build the system as I want it. Really, the ideal system that I would like, right? So by default, no sharing of data, nothing in the cloud, everything on my smartphone under my control. And then gradually share some pieces of data, always after I give consent, right? And I can always remove my consent, right? Because I also want to contribute to research, and I want my doctor and my hospital to provide me for the best care, but I want to be in control. So that's why we started at the far end of the privacy, maximum privacy, and then allow the patients to gradually reduce the privacy in certain specific cases, right? I was like like probably many people, I was fed up with people abusing my data, if you want. So I wanted to completely cut short of that.
Interesting. It definitely it makes sense from the sentiment of you talk about generally with what's happening with individuals' data and healthcare. It definitely seems like it's very much more personal, which is why I think it's very important to have those protections. It's interesting though that I feel like having a centralized location for your healthcare data. In your case, it's more decentralized. Each individual has control of their own data. I mean, it can be pretty powerful. You already kind of alluded to this earlier, but what are some of the things that you're allowing patients to do or partners to do with this healthcare data? I think you talked a little bit on your website, remote patient monitoring. You have solutions for clinical trials. Can you highlight some of these things and why they might be important for the patient and other healthcare stakeholders?
Yeah, so you mentioned the word centralizing data, right? I think that in our case, we're kind of centralizing data. So, but we're centralizing on the patient's smartphone, right? So it's indeed, if you look at all the patients, it's distributed. But ideally, each patient has all of their data centralized on their smartphone, right? In a distributed way, if you look at all the patients. So for me, we are still kind of centralizing the data, but in a very different way than most people do, right? So that's the first element. The second element is that because of that, it makes things more complex, obviously, right? Because if you can put all the data on a server, it's much easier, right, to process the data very clearly. But I don't think it's going to work in the long term, and it's going to create all kinds of conflicts of interest and the commercial interest against the patient's interest. So let's not do that. Let's do it more difficultly, in a more difficult manner, but as the patients want that. So the second thing we had to build is an exchange platform that would work with that. And we build that too, and it's a peer-to-peer platform. So when I'm exchanging data, I can exchange my son's data with my wife, right? The data will go to her smartphone. I can exchange data with my doctor. It will go to their electronic health record software. Same with my hospital. And then as part of a clinical trial, I can share some of my data when I'm invited by a pharma company or a CRO. So these two elements constitute the foundations of Andaman, which is the storage of information. What I didn't reveal in detail is that we do a lot of work in normalizing the data, because if data comes from a lab, if it comes from a hospital, from my doctor, from manual input from my wife, from my own watch and my glucometer, we need to have all of that data normalized, right? So under the hood, we do a lot of things with the data to make it clean and easy to use, right? So these two elements, the mobile app and the peer-to-peer platform are really the foundations of our system. So you were asking about the use cases. Basically, we can work in any use case that needs data exchange with the patients. Our grand goal, our dream, is to be the platform to exchange data between patients and any stakeholder, right? So the use cases are numerous. On our website, you will find a dozen use cases already. I like to group them in two categories: the care ones, where we're trying to help the patients. So it's monitoring of the patient. It's making sure they're taking their drugs. So that's adherence treatments. Monitoring is collecting data from patients. You can also send questionnaires to the patients to ask them if their Crohn's disease is flaring up for the moment or not. So there's lots of use cases where it's getting more and more important these days to be able to be in contact with the patients when they are outside of the hospital, right? It's why we're talking about telemedicine, about home care, about virtual care. All of these terms become very trendy these days because everybody, or most people, have a smartphone, which is a super advanced computer. They have that in their hands. They have the internet, which is a very cheap or completely free way to exchange data. So suddenly, we are able to do a lot more with the patients being at home, or with the patients going to their primary doctor, which is not the hospital, right? Typically, the family doctor is called the first line and then the hospitals is called the second line. Now integrating between those lines and the patient is becoming a lot easier. So those are all the use cases around the care: remote monitoring, teleconsultation, exchange of data, both ways. And the second big group is everything about research. And there, the classic element is the clinical trial, right? Where the researchers need to get data from the patients about the drug they're taking. Do they have any side effects? Do they have a headache? Right? They want to study the effects of the drug before it gets approved on the market. That's one example. And then there's all kinds of other types of studies, which are called real-world evidence studies, right? Which means that there is a need now to collect a lot more data than was needed previously in the clinical trial. So in the US, the FDA, and in Europe, the EMA, and similarly, they used to ask for clinical evidence of a drug in the past. Now they're asking for real-world evidence. So not only is the drug efficient, but what about the real world, right? So in my case, for my leukemia, there are, I think, 3 or 4 very efficient drugs to control my leukemia, right? So clinically, they're almost equivalent, right? So the clinical evidence is there. But what about the real world evidence? Do I have side effects? Is, for example, one drug with a pill and another one in injection, which is more difficult, right? Is one drug to be taken 1 pill per day and the other one pill or 2 pills 3 times per day, which makes it more complex, right? What about the interaction with? So all of these elements, which are not as critical as the clinical evidence, but become necessary, because what will the FDA reimburse in the 4 drugs that I'm taking? Well, the ones that they're all equivalent clinically, but they will prefer to reimburse the one that's the best for the patient globally. In the real world, right? So this real world evidence is growing, and it's new needs that the FDA is imposing to the pharma. So the pharma needs to collect those data. And then there's all those quality of life studies. There's also use cases where the FDA is saying, okay, if you guys from the pharma, if you want the patients to contribute to research in the future, you better keep them engaged and satisfied by having participated to your trial. And one thing they would like is to have feedback, right? What has my data contributed to? So you should send to the patients that were in the trial the results of the study. They should have their data back, right? If there's some data that has been used, they should. So these are new use cases, and our platform is also very good for that. Type of use case. And then there's other use cases, more a bit different, like building registries, right? Registries of patients. Recruitment of patients is going to be also more and more difficult when we go to rare disease, right? There are some diseases today that only 300 patients in the world have, right? So you have to find those patients. It's going to be very difficult. So the pharma that wants to develop a drug for that rare disease, they will have a very hard time finding the patients and putting them on a trial, right? So there's all kind of complexities that arise from the fact that basically now we cure all the big classic diseases that everybody has, right? And then we have to be more and more precise and more personalized to go to the next step, to cure the rarer diseases. And genetics will become more and more important, because you and I will have the same disease, but due to our genetic profile, one drug will work very well for me and not for you, right? So the drugs will also be more and more personalized. And for that, you need patient feedback. You need individual patient feedback. You need all the data from that patient, the data that comes from their health record and their lab results and so on.
Wow.
These are a few examples. Yeah,
that's fit. I mean, I don't think I did justice with the 2 examples that I had, but I think that was, I think that's kind of highlights the power, but also the importance of being able to have a method of managing patient data and being able to distribute it in a meaningful way. I'm curious, you still have 10 minutes left, yes? Still good on time?
Yeah, a little bit more. no worries.
Great. I have two questions left that I wanted to ask you, and then we'll close out. One was, do you see your platform or your solution, do you offer it also as a white label tool, or does this integrate with, for example, providers interfaces, or telemedicine solutions as well as having a standalone application? And then I'm just curious if you could also highlight some of those triggers that would cause patients to want to access. What are the most common triggers that cause patients to want to access their health data?
Yeah. So yes, we do offer our platform as a white label system, right? Because it can be used for so many use cases that we are sure that we will not be able to do that. Our dream is to distribute the platform to as many patients as possible, because one thing I forgot to say is that we have a social goal in the company. So, my story, my son's story, and we are still alive today thanks to modern medicine, right? So I wanted to give back somehow. And so I built this platform. The revenue clearly comes from hospitals and pharma companies, but for patients, it's completely free, right? And even if some people say, if it's free, then it's because your data is being used, right? No, not in this case. It's completely free, and we don't get anything back, except that you are starting to collect your data, and that in the future, you might want to collaborate to research or other projects, right? So that the social goal is clearly there. Today, if you want, you go on the App Store, the Google Play Store, you download your Andaman7, and you start managing your health data completely free without your data being used by anybody. So that's very clear. So that's the first part of the answer. Yeah. So the triggers for patients to use a tool like Andaman is, unfortunately, in most cases, when people have health problem, right? When you're in good health, we are humans, right? We don't care too much, right? Well, we try to exercise, we try to eat healthy food, and we do our best, right? But for that, you don't really need a full health record management system, right? But when you have a chronic disease, or when you have a serious disease like cancer or other types of diseases, then suddenly you feel that you're in trouble, and you want to have control on what's happening. You want to understand, right? And you very soon realize that doctors are asking you questions, all types of doctors. What are your allergies? What drugs are you taking? What is your medical history? Because it's hard for them to communicate, right? And so they always ask questions to the patients, right? So you feel that you have a need to be in control of that, and to know all your past data, your past history, to be able to share it, to be a part of the solution, part of your care, right? So the trigger is really when you are sick, then you start to be cautious about your health, and then you install Andaman, and then you start using it, and then slowly you discover all that it offers. Yeah. So that's usually the trigger. Another trigger is if we're doing, for example, a clinical trial with a pharma company, and they recruit 1,000 patients through doctors, through hospitals, right? Then they install Andaman just for the trial, and then they realize what Andaman can do. And so they see that they can do a lot more with that, which is to their benefits, and it's free, and so they're doing it. Yeah, that's the second way to get installed, Andaman installed in the patient's phone.
Awesome. My last question, and then we'll go to closing remarks. I'm just curious, what do you think is the future of patient data management, and what do you see that most people don't?
Yeah, what I see is that it's very necessary to have access to all of your data on your smartphone. When I explain the project to people, and I tell them, on your phone, you have all your pictures, you have your contacts, you have your agenda, right? You even have your bank, right? You have everything. What about your health data? And suddenly they realize, yeah, gee, that's probably the most important data, and I don't have it. Or I just have a few pieces of data from my running application, right? Or from my sleep app, but I don't have my full health record. And I even have some people that tell me, it doesn't exist, really? I thought it would exist. It would seem so obvious, right? And it doesn't, or it's not very well developed, right? So I think it's something that in a few years, everybody will say, yes, of course, we have all of our information on our smartphone. It's obvious, right? But today people just haven't tilted. They haven't realized how important it is, right? So that's one element. A second element is that I'm very puzzled by all the GDPR and all of this, right? Being in Europe, when the GDPR came, it put so many constraints that as Europeans, we were thinking, gee, this is going to slow down our possibilities of developing innovative projects around big data, about AI, because all of these need data. And suddenly all of the data is being controlled, right? All the companies in Europe cannot do what they want, right? And so many Europeans were feeling that, oh, it's a bit unfair because Americans don't have those constraints and Chinese don't have those constraints, right? So they're going to go much faster. But what's happening now is the California Privacy Act. And it's a few Eastern states, similar privacy acts. And then Brazil is coming up with regulations like this. So surprisingly, GDPR showed the example, and then others are starting to think and say, I think it's probably good to have more privacy because everybody's furious about their data being abused, right? So I think that surprisingly, everything is moving in a direction where there's going to be more and more privacy, more decisions by the patients or the citizen, more control, and an explicit consent. So I think that's also something that will come in the future. That's what I believe will come. And then having a system where you start from full privacy like we did is a big advantage, right? Because the regulations help us. The regulations currently today say all the patients, all the citizens should have access to all of their data. And if you're using the data of a citizen, then you should be careful about this, and it's putting a lot of constraints on who's using the data from somebody else, right? So if you start from the citizen or from the patient, then everything is easier, right? Because the regulations are completely in line with that. So that's the second element I see. The third element I see is, I think, one that most people see is the importance of data, right? Globally, lots of data and data being processed by big data first, because you can extract additional data from that, but AI also, because AI will extract data and create knowledge, which is one level up in the complexity, and bring many benefits to everybody, to the common, right? That's probably the third element I see. What else? Maybe the last element is that something that I really believe in is it's a bit hippies, right? But it's power to the people, right? Again, internet did that, right? Internet gave everybody the possibility to have access to all of information, right? Then Web 2.0 came, where basically everybody was capable of contributing, publishing, personal blogs, social media, and all of these, right? So it's putting back power to the people. And so what I see in the health sector is that patients will have more power again. They will recuperate the power that they should not have lost, right? They're becoming health consumers instead of patients, right? So they're going to put their money in their services that they want. So health consumers is going to be a big trend. And also, like I said earlier, personalized medicine will become more and more important, because now we basically are solving the big problems, right? You've seen probably recently in the news, polio is completely eradicated from this world, right? And so we're progressing, right? Now, to progress more, we need to be more personalized and focus on the rarer diseases and so on. So it's going to be more personalized too. So I think that's the future trend too.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Vincent. This was fantastic. I mean, I really appreciate it, and especially giving us the detail, the level of different detail of not only how you protect individuals' information, the process in which you do so, but also the different use cases that are possible with having this information in this way. I think that was really unique. Before I close out, is there anything that you wanted to mention or announce to the audience or share at all?
Well, I would like to say to all patients that it's very important to have access to your data, to control your data. So start doing it. The sooner, the better, right? Because you're going to build something that might be useful for you in the future if you have a health problem. So you should really consider that now, as soon as possible. A second element is I would talk to doctors and medical staff, which are sometimes a bit worried about all these changes. And I would say, don't be afraid, right? It's as a doctor, your main goal is to help patients, right? So this is what's going on here, right? And by giving the patients more control of their health, it's helping the patients. So it's your basic goal in life, right there, and there is no fears to have. And if there are fears about, there's a lot, well, the news are talking about AI and all of these. You know, the calculator did not remove the work from engineers, right? Just engineers started to work faster and do bigger projects much faster, cheaper. So the calculator is just a tool. So AI will be a tool for you doctors to do your work faster, better, with more power, and it's going to empower you as a doctor too. So let's not be afraid. Let's move forward, I would say.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, that was a great closing statement. And Vincent, thank you again for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. Again, for the audience, make sure you go and download Andaman7 and use the application. And but this was great. This is again, this is the purpose of this interview, was to feature what we think are one of the best companies within the data management category globally. And Andaman7 is really important to taking that next step forward, I think, in healthcare in a lot of different ways. And so this was a fantastic interview. Vincent, thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for looking at Andaman7 and helping us with our mission.